Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar. We have, we have the pleasure of yours to have you with us today. Today's webinar is very special. It's by one of the leaders representing our region, Region 11 itself. Now, the person for today, she has joined Toastmasters in 2006, so that's 12 years, a dozen of years in Toastmasters, and in just a couple of years, she has taken lead and brought and took herself to such an extent that currently she is the international director for Region 11. So it's a pleasure to have her with us. Madam Morag Mathieson. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we are really honored to have you with us for tonight's webinar. Without further ado, Madam Morag, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you this evening. I hope that you can all hear me. And if you're having any problems at all, we do have a chat function. If you're familiar with that, you can type in there any comments, questions, any problems that you're having. And Yassine, our host for this evening, will see those. And hopefully we'll be able to help us with anything that we need to deal with on the way through the presentation. So my plan is to present to you, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end, I believe. The topic this evening is leaders conquering challenges. We might know something about that if we've had any kind of leadership position. I guess that many people coming into leadership wish simply that it might be all plain sailing and sunshine. And wouldn't that just be wonderful? But it's not usually the reality. I was interested that your district director asked me to speak on this subject because it is such an important one. Sorry. I went forward by 2 slides. Here we are now. It was Stephen Covey, who many of you will know from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and some other work that he's done, who said that opposition is a natural part of life. Just as we develop our physical muscles through overcoming opposition, such as lifting weights, we develop our character muscles by overcoming challenges and adversity. So what I take from that is he's trying to say that we can find the positive when we have to face challenges as leaders. And I would suggest to you that some of my own greatest personal growth has come through facing those challenges. As a district leader, I was the district director of District 59 when we had 18 different countries across continental Europe, with people speaking around 15 different languages and about 11 different currencies in play. So you can imagine that we actually had such a lot of diversity and complexity that almost certainly there would be challenges. We were also a very large district, as you were just before your immediate reformations. And those things all contribute to the challenge of leadership in Toastmasters. But in our life beyond Toastmasters, leadership is just the same, isn't it? We still have to face those challenges that help us to develop our character muscles. And I think the challenges in leadership that do that for us best are those challenges that we have to face when our personal core values are tested. I don't know what your core values are. I know what mine are. And I know that many times in leadership, those are the moments when I have really had to look at myself in the mirror and say, what do I stand for? What's really important here? And those are the decisions that will determine how I proceed, how I will handle a situation, what I will decide to do. So I think those challenges help us discover who we really are, but they also help us to develop our personal and our leadership strength. If I were to ask you this evening what the top 3 leadership challenges are that you think leaders face, I'm not quite sure what you would say. I actually did a little survey of some of my fellow board members a few days ago, asking them what did they think the top 3 challenges were. And it was interesting to me because they came up with different things, but the things they came up with are all echoed in a piece of work that I'm going to show you and I'm going to speak about tonight because I think it's relevant to where we are. So the Centre for Creative Leadership carried out a survey. They studied 763 middle and executive level leaders in China, Egypt, India, Singapore, Spain, the UK and the US, and found that consistently they face the same basic challenges. So it would appear wherever we are in the world as a leader, the challenges we face are determined by the fact that we're in leadership, not necessarily where we are in location. And I was delighted to see that my fellow board members' guesses all fell within the parameters of this, the findings of the Centre for Creative Leadership. So here are the 6 top challenges that they found that leaders face: developing managerial skills, developing others, inspiring others, leading a team, guiding change, managing stakeholders. I don't know where you are in your leadership journey, and perhaps you have already experienced some of these challenges. Perhaps you're facing them now, and if you haven't faced them yet, maybe one day you will. So hopefully we'll find some helpful things as we go through looking at these 6 challenges. What do we mean by each of those? Well, developing managerial effectiveness is that challenge of developing relevant skills. Skills like time management, prioritization, they're often not thought of as the really sexy skills of leadership, but they're absolutely essential to help us deal with leadership situations. The second is developing others. Others that we are responsible for. In leadership, we usually have people who report to us, and we have a level of responsibility for them. The third, inspiring others. It's that challenge of helping others to see what we can see and agree with our decision that those are the things we're aiming for. Those are the goals that we want to achieve. That's the vision that we should be working towards. The fourth is leading a team. We are all individuals, and that is, I think, one of the joys and beauties of a team. But it's also one of those challenges, isn't it? Because we all come with our own individual personalities, our own preferences, our own personal values, our own ideas of what is achievable, our own skills and our own dimensions. And somewhere or other, as a leader, we have to take that group of diverse individuals and guide them and lead them towards achieving something. Because a team really is just a group if it doesn't have some kind of task or goal to achieve. The fifth is guiding change. Change, I think, is a constant in our world. There are many business writers who will tell you that if an organisation is not growing and changing, then it's probably dying. So as a leader, learning to guide change is a key skill for us and a key challenge. And the final one is managing our stakeholders. Those people who have a vested interest in what we do, whether they're people who sit above us in an organisational structure, or people who are responsible for funding projects or work that we're doing, or people who just have a lot of influence. So those are the 6 challenges, 6 top leadership challenges globally. And I'd like to talk through those with us in a bit more detail now. With all of these challenges, I would say to you that if we sit and wait for something to happen, then very little of any consequence or significance will happen. But what does happen in those situations may not be what we want and may not go in the right direction. So leaders who let things happen often end up in more difficulty than active leaders. Leaders who embrace their responsibility, embrace the challenge of what they have, and bring all of their leadership skills to play. And think about, on the screen, there are some real key words in there. Understanding motivation, understanding our personal motivation, the motivation of those we work with, being dedicated to whatever task we have taken up. We said yes to something. Where is our commitment to that? Being disciplined in ourselves and in our work with others. Finding our drive, our momentum to keep us going. What's in my heart? What is my passion? What do I really care about? How much do I care? And then a word that's one of our core values in Toastmasters, the concept of excellence, of being the best you can be and doing the best you can do. So let's look at the first of those challenges, the developing managerial effectiveness. When we develop managerial effectiveness, this is really about managing ourselves. And I think before we manage other people, somehow or other we have to manage ourselves. So we have to try and get a handle on how we deal with our time, what our priorities are, either for the tasks we've been given in leadership or the other aspects of our lives, because we are not one-dimensional people. We have many facets to our lives. And those other things might be commitments and responsibilities in our communities, with our families, with our friends. It might be a spiritual dimension to life. It might be a physical dimension to life. We have many, many things that compete for our priorities. But if we are to be effective leaders and face our challenges head on, we have to know what our priorities are, and we have to behave as if we know what our priorities are. And sometimes that's much harder. We also have to make decisions, and we have to take care of ourselves. Somewhere as leaders, we set goals, and we set goals usually that have timelines and deadlines. In Toastmasters, often our goals are being set in the months of June, July, and August. And sometimes it's at the beginning of a term of responsibility. And it's a time when we are full of enthusiasm for the task that lies ahead, hopefully not full of dread and despair, but hopefully full of hope and expectation for what might be achieved. And sometimes we set goals that are really, really ambitious goals. It's not wrong to set ambitious goals, but if we set an ambitious goal, we need to keep that goal in mind, and we need to have a plan that supports it. We need to have a plan A, and we may also need a plan B. So we need to know what our goals are and remind ourselves of them. When I was district director of District 59, one of the goals of my district for that year was to be #1 in the world. And I spent the whole year, I had a sheet of paper that sat in front of my desk with the #1 on it. And that was to remind me that this was the goal that my district had embraced, and that I, as the leader of that district, had to behave in a way that said, I believe we can do this. And if my district is the #1 district in the world, what does my service to my district look like? So if I am the district director of the #1 district in the world, how do I behave when I take a call from a member who's unhappy? or when I'm preparing a plan for a meeting, how do I behave? How does that influence my behaviour? Because I think keeping goals in mind and knowing what your focus is really helps you to determine how to do your job. It's a big factor in managing yourself and managing your behaviour. I also think keeping your goals in mind is important because we need to review our goals from time to time. Sometimes situations change, things happen over which we have no control. So we need to be checking, are the goals that we have in place still the right goals? And if they're not, what are the right goals? And if we're not achieving them, why are we not achieving them? Is there something that additional we should do? Is there something different we should do? Or was it the wrong goal in the first place? So we need to be prepared to adjust our goals sometimes, not at every turn. That would be confusing for everybody because you need to keep them in mind and keep the focus. But we also have to be realistic and we have to be flexible enough to make the changes when they're required. Also, when we think of managing ourselves, we need to think about managing our time well. We need to be focusing on what is urgent and what is important. There are many, many things you can choose to do. But I find a good question is, what are the tasks or the responsibilities, the things that need to be done that I need to do? No one else needs to do them. They are mine. And if I do them, it's done. And what could I possibly give to someone else? I am very good at giving away tasks. I think delegation is such an important skill as a leader in learning how to include others in your work, because that way you get more work done. So when others take on the responsibility, you are then free to do new things or different things, and you increase the capacity of your team when you delegate. When you think about how you spend your time delivering those goals, think about what you're not good at and what you are good at. And what you're not good at, learn to delegate those things especially, or very quickly learn how to do them if you really feel you must. Because when we do things that we're not good at, they take us so much longer than it takes someone who is good at them. And then we have the freedom to invest our time in the things that we are good at, the things that make a difference. But also when we think about our goals and our time, think about the tasks that are lying before you that you think you have to do, and ask yourself, does it really need to be done? Because some things just don't. And then with respect to goals as well, thinking about decision making. Some decisions can be made very quickly and don't need a lot of thought and care and consideration. Other decisions need your time. You need to research information. Perhaps you need to consult others, especially if those decisions involve change or involve other people. It's a really good idea to consult. And then to filter the decision we think we're going to make through our core values. If I made this decision, would it stand up to the test of my core values? And would it stand up to the test of the values of the organisation I'm representing? Think also with our decisions about the consequences. And if you're really not sure or you need a bit of support, or you're just a little uncertain, consider having a confidant. When I was the programme quality director in my district, I remember feeling a little overwhelmed with some of the things I had to work through and dealing with lots of different people in different situations. And I found in my district a past district governor who looks at the world very differently to the way I look at the world. So when something would come across my desk that needed a response, and I would find myself thinking, this is ridiculous. How could this person be so stupid? How on earth, la, 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 and really wanted to respond probably quite negatively. I discovered that if I called this past district governor and said to him without revealing anyone's identity, and said, imagine you had this situation. How would you deal with it? He would almost invariably present me with a completely different scenario that made me think again. And that helped me enormously. It really expanded my thinking, and it expanded my ability to consider more angles of a situation before making the decision. So maybe you have someone around you who would be a good confidant. Of course, they've got to be able to be trusted with your secrets, because you don't want them telling the district's business or your business, your work business everywhere. Another point about managing yourself: deal with the difficult stuff. There is a temptation to think if it's behind, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. Trust me, it will not go away. That's one thing you can be absolutely sure of. You have to deal with those difficult situations. So whether it's a difficult conversation with someone, and as leaders, I think we come across these often, people perhaps who are behaving in an unreasonable way or causing difficulties, to have that hard conversation can save a lot of trouble and heartache later, and clears one more thing that's eating at your time and at your patience and your peace. I find it's useful if you feel there's so much to do, how do I deal with it all, is to make a list of all of those things and then ask yourself, if I could only do 3 of these things, which 3 would they be? Which 3 things on my list would make the biggest difference? The temptation, of course, is to choose the easiest 3 just to reduce the size of your list. But actually what you need to do is choose the 3 that would make the biggest difference. And consider the impact on yourself, allowing it to build up, builds stress for ourselves and for others. And it stops us being able to focus properly on the things we need to focus on. Negative things eat our energy. So the sooner we can deal with them and resolve them and get them out of the way, the better it is for us and for others. The next part of these top challenges for leadership, I've put under the heading of developing relationship skills. And that covers those ideas of inspiring others, developing others, and managing teams. I've put all of those together because they're really all about the relationships that we have. There's a story told of 2 men, many centuries ago, who were building stones to create a structure. And as someone walked past one day, he saw that one of the men looked really fed up and bored and said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm laying bricks." Okay. And as the passerby came back again, he looked at the other man, who was very passionately and contentedly also laying bricks, and asked him, "What are you doing?" And the other man said, "I'm building a cathedral." What we see here are 2 people, one who had the same task. One of them only saw the task, and the other saw the vision and understood the why. As Simon Sinek talks about, if you've ever read any or heard any of his work, he talks about understanding your why in a situation. As leaders, when we share vision with people, we help them understand why. And when we understand why, it's easier to be inspired and motivated to achieve what we need to do. When we inspire others, we also want to show them what's in it for them. And it gives us a chance to share our passion and our heart. All those great communication skills that we learn as leaders, this is a great chance to use those in a particular direction. to inspire others to embrace the vision that we have, so that they are included in our task, whatever it is. We also, in inspiring others, need to understand them as individuals. What motivates one person may not be exactly what motivates another. When I was district director, my district administration manager was someone who sees the world differently perhaps to me. And I learned very quickly when I worked with her, I could give her a task and she was competent to do that task and she could just do it. Or I could spend time and help her understand the background to that task. When I did that, it changed, because when I did that, she began to see the potential of what else she could do, as well as the basic task that I would have asked her. She understood the context, the quality of her contribution improved dramatically, and she was a much bigger support to me and to the whole team because I understood how she functioned. So getting to know our teams as individuals helps us when we want to speak directly to them. And also to understand how they receive praise and recognition. Some people need to be recognised publicly, some people don't. Of course, it's important if in a team, if you're going to recognise some people publicly, that you recognise everyone publicly. But there'll be other aspects to praise and recognition that you might think about. And all of those things inspire people, not just for the task, but it inspires them to be part of the team that you're leading. And as a leader, if your team is working with you, then you have overcome a huge challenge. The second part of relationship skills, I believe, is around mentoring, coaching, and developing others. When we do this, it gives us a chance to help other people grow and be a part of their development, which can be incredibly rewarding for us as leaders. But what it also does is support them to grow into new roles. So in some way, we are making or helping to make future leaders in our organisation. We might also, depending on how we develop people, help them by sharing work with them, by including them in things that they've never been part of before. And using good, competent skills of giving feedback on performance can really help people to grow. And thirdly, thinking about managing team effectiveness. Teamwork really does make the dream work. We need good teamwork to get along. So how can a team be effective that doesn't exhaust us as leaders of that team? I believe that one of the first things is that they need to have a clear purpose. We need to know what this team is all about. One of the things I was doing today was chairing a committee, another form of team. And right at the beginning, this was our first meeting, and right at the beginning, the task was to remind them what is our purpose as a team, so that we could really focus our energy and our effort. So if people understand what the team is about and what you're trying to achieve, what's the big thing? What's the main thing for this team to achieve? Also, I believe effective teams mean that an effective team is one that has strong internal support. So where individuals trust each other. Sometimes when we set up a team, we are tempted to just rush. But there are various models out there of how teams function, and we know very clearly that it's good to invest a bit of time in setting up your team at the beginning, helping people to get to know each other a little better, helping them to develop bonds of trust. Because when we trust people, we work much more efficiently. Also within an effective team, we need to have open communication. We need to be able to say what we think. but not, of course, at anyone else's expense. It has to be done in a respectful way with each other, but to be able to openly voice our concerns, to openly voice an opinion, an idea, because our members of our teams have so much within them to give. If we can create a good platform for open communication, we really can develop something rich with that team. Effective teams, I think, also have conflict in them. And maybe you didn't expect me to say that, but I think conflict is healthy. But we have to manage that conflict. We can't let it get out of control. We have to keep its focus on the task we're doing. So disagreement within the team is a good thing if we can explore why we disagree and help us perhaps to get to a better solution than we would have before. We have to make sure, though, conflict is never about the individual, but rather it is about the issue, and it does need to be resolved so that we can move on. Often, I think thinking of conflict, a helpful model is to think of two people watching the same movie, but seeing it in completely different ways. If you think of the way that movie cameras film movies, they film different angles and they see different things. And I think that's what happens to us as people, and that's often the way of conflict. So hearing each other's movie, the movie that's playing in the other person's mind, can be a really great way as a leader to help us understand the perspective of the members of our team and bring them together. Within teams, if we see there are small niggles, small troubles, we need to deal with those, because if we don't deal with the small stuff grows. Effective teams also have an element of praise and recognition. Members want to feel valued. They want feedback, not just that you didn't do that very well, but rather, I loved the job you did there. That was so well done. You did it so quickly, so efficiently. Whatever it is, whatever the effort is that you want to recognize, make sure it's done with the rule of praise in public and chastise in private. We also might think of our teams as not being static. So sometimes we need to add more people into our teams, or we might need to release people if it's necessary. As leaders of a team, we should always be interested in what that team is doing, but not overbearing, and remembering that when we release or delegate a task to the team or to an individual, we need to give them the space to actually carry it out. We need to make sure that our team keeps its focus on its goal too, and understands that there's great clarity. Sometimes leadership can feel lonely because we have to carry the responsibility as leaders for the decisions we make. Those decisions are often times unpopular. We may have to take a stand that not everybody agrees with, but we know it's the right thing to do. We have to think of the consequences of the decisions we make and of the stand that we've taken. But, and there's a but here, you are not alone as a leader. There are people around you. If you are very fortunate, your wider team is there to support you. But think about who else you have around you. Perhaps you have mentors. I spoke earlier about my confidant that I had as a leader in district. I also have had, when I was district director and also when I was region advisor, I had a peer mentor, someone else in the same role as me who was willing to be my mentor and let me mentor them. So we understood each other's situation. We could be honest and open with each other. We could encourage each other. We could discuss situations. It's so important to have people around you, because sometimes when we get into challenging situations and we feel a bit overwhelmed by things, other people can help us to see a fresh perspective. When I was district director, one of the situations I faced was in a very short space of time. In fact, within the space of 1 week, I had 3 different things happen to me. I had some personal stuff in my family going on. I had to go and collect an order that was sent, an order for many, many thousands of dollars that was sent from Toastmasters International to Germany, supposed to come to my home, but was intercepted by the customs office, who then wanted us to pay who knows how many hundreds of dollars of duty on the items. But in the middle of the item, there was one line that the customs officer, who didn't speak any English, recognised. And it was an item that said laser pens. And he thought, Germany has very strict laws around the strength of lasers that can be imported or used in the country. So we have to test these. And those were taken away for product testing. They failed the testing. And then the customs officer gave me a hammer and told me that I had to smash up 24 laser pens on the floor of the customs house. I was just about crying when I thought of all the money this had already cost my district, the delay and the indignity of smashing up what I would have considered perfectly good products. I then, 2 days later, was on my way to a charter celebration for a new club. And on the way in the train, thought I was sending a text to my husband to tell him I loved him, only to discover that that text was heading out to the phone of a work colleague in another country. I was able to rescue that situation, thankfully, but by the time I arrived at the end of that week, I really just wanted to crawl into a corner and never come out again. I felt like the worst district leader in the world. I had a Skype call with one of my team back in Europe who said, when I told him, I just feel like the worst district leader in the world. And he said very simply, but you know that that's not true. Right in that moment, I had forgotten that it wasn't true. And he reminded me of all the good things I'd done as a leader. And sometimes we need those people around us to help us just get a fresh perspective, to remind us of what the truth of a situation is. If I hadn't made myself vulnerable and told him, of course I wouldn't have received that fresh perspective from him. As a leader, there can be great strength in our weakness when we allow ourselves to admit the struggle we're having to someone. Of course, we want to choose someone that we feel safe with and we feel comfortable with, but I would encourage every leader to look for those people around them who can be their great support and encourager. The fifth challenge for leaders to overcome is the challenge of guiding change. We live in what's sometimes called a VUCA world, perhaps you know that phrase, a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous world. And we have to learn to adapt to the world around us if we are actually going to lead and manage change. It's very natural for us not to like change. We like to know what's familiar. Most of us like the familiar, and so any kind of change may make us feel a little uncertain. But there's something about being open to fresh thinking. When we open ourselves to fresh thinking, it keeps us moving. I love the question, what if? Because it opens my mind to a possibility and says, I know you've said you don't want to do this, but what if? And then to start to imagine and to dream, to work through situations and to bring into mind a possibility that you had never considered before. As leaders guiding change, we need to encourage people to try something new because they will be just as resistant to change as we are. So we want to help them to see the what's in it for them factor. Why could this be good for them, even at the smallest, tiniest level? If you've seen some of the communication that's come with the Pathways programme introduction, you will find in there a lot of that presentation that the Pathways guides had is geared towards the why this is a great idea and what could be in it for you as a member of our organisation. It's fair to say that change is often emotional. My district has been through reformation once and is about to go through it again, just as yours has recently gone through reformation and has done previously. I don't know what it was like in your district, but in my district, it was very emotional for some people when we had our last reformation, because they had been members from before we were a district. So in some way, they had an ownership, an understanding, a love and a concern for the organisation that felt like we were being torn apart rather than the potential of everything. Of course, they've continued and things have gone well. But when we as leaders are guiding change, whatever our role is, we have to remember that change for some people is emotional, and we need to acknowledge that and show empathy towards those. We need to capture that vision, to be the visionary in the moment, but at the same time, be authentic, be who we really are, and show our passion for the task that we have in hand and the change that we are leading. And my final thought on guiding change is we need to be clear. So we need to explain what we know. Often when change is happening, we see many rumours. People hear a little bit and they imagine a lot. So if we are leading this, we need to communicate. We need to communicate well. We need to communicate clearly. We need to deal in the reality of our situation, of what we know, what we don't know, so that people understand us and they can rely on us and trust us. And we need to communicate often. That would be one of my big, strong recommendations if you are ever leading or managing any kind of change. The sixth of our factors is managing stakeholders. Understand your network. Sometimes it's a good idea to map out your network. Put yourself in the centre. Who are the people around you that you relate to? People that you are in relationship with in the organisation, whatever organisation you're thinking about. Who are closer to you? Who are further away? How do you relate to each other? What influence do they have on you? Do you have on them? So that you have a clear understanding of how this works. Understand how you can help them and understand what you need from them. When we work with stakeholders, we need to keep them informed, and we have to do that proactively. Not that they should be coming to us and asking for things, but rather that we should be going to them and saying, this project, this is how it's going. Or your line manager, whatever your responsibilities are, whoever your stakeholders are, keep them informed appropriately. They don't need to know everything, but think about what you want to highlight to them so that you have a chance to highlight your own achievements, but also the achievements of others. And you have a chance to show new thinking, innovation, passion, excellence, all of those things. How would you show that when you communicate with them? It also helps to create feelings of transparency when we communicate well. With our stakeholders, we also want to be gathering information. So we need to be listening and paying attention. It's one of the things I love to do when I go on district visits. And unfortunately, this year, I have no visits to your district. Maybe next year, hopefully, I'll get to come visit you. But I love to listen to our members and understand their perspective, their experience, because that can really help us as leaders when we face issues, when we have that understanding in our heads and hearts. And finally, on managing stakeholders, we need to operate with integrity. So the conversations and the communications with our stakeholders should never be about gossip. They should be dealing with facts and understanding. They should be about taking feedback, and they should never be about manipulation. Those conversations need to be, just as our others, filtered through our core values, our personal values, our organisational values, but also ones where we've thought about the consequences, and that when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we can smile. A few personal thoughts on this subject that have not been covered by the other 6 points are these. The first is to persevere. We all feel like quitting sometime. It often comes when we're tired or when things are happening in our personal lives, because that draws so much from us that in our leadership situations, we get worn out and we get pushed to the edge. We need to remember that leadership is more of a marathon than a sprint. There will be challenges and disappointments. That happens. But we can still persevere. When we come to that point of feeling like quitting, it's a good idea to ask ourselves, why do I feel like this? Either by ourselves or with a confidant, and then to address those things, the root causes of this, rather than the symptom. The feeling of quitting is a symptom. What is the root cause? And that's the thing we need to address. Then we're able to persevere and see the thing through to its end. Secondly, we need to find balance in life. We need to find time to sleep, to eat, to relax, time with our family, time with our friends, and also time doing the tasks that we have in hand, but to get it all into balance. If you've never done it, a really good tip is to take your week and divide it into 21 blocks and see what those 21 blocks look like. And make sure that on most weeks you have between 3 and 5 blocks that are personal time, away from work, away from responsibilities, time when you can go for a swim, when you can read a book, when you can go for dinner with friends, whatever it is, but just time that is not spent on the focused task of your leadership or your work responsibilities. The third is, I would say, do the right thing. Temptation comes in bucket loads when you're in leadership. And temptation joined up with tiredness makes us really vulnerable and susceptible to choose the easy over the ethical. But again, this is a situation where we need to think about the consequences and weigh up the options that we have before us. And we need to be convinced that the decision we make and the actions we take are the right ones. So we need to do the right thing. And my final personal thought on this subject is that we should always be learners. So reflect on the experience you're having. Reflect on the things that make you smile and that drive you forward and where you have great momentum and energy. But reflect on the things that make you feel like giving up, the things that drain your energy. Reflect on the experience of working in a team. How did you add value to the team? What communication produced results? What motivation is there? How do you work with other people? How could you be better in the future? Keep learning from yourself, from mentors, from others around you. Don't lose the opportunity. We all have different motivations for doing the things we do. And I have quotes from 2 people here that show different motivations in some way. And the first is from Michael Phelps, the American swimmer, who said, "I think sometimes I guess you see records, you say you want to get there and use that as motivation. In a way, it's kind of cool if there is a possibility to rewrite history and be up there with the greats of Olympic history." I would say that Michael Phelps has a real vision here for something, which now he has achieved, but at the time that he initially wrote this or said this, thought this idea probably wasn't. You know, it's that vision of what might be possible was his great driving motivation. Maybe I could be there too. And I guess it's back to my question of what if? And the other angle and motivation I have is from someone quite different, from the New Zealander Edmund Hillary, who said, if you really want to do something, you will work hard for it. So whenever we face challenges, that memory of, I really want to do this, my passion is in there, then I will somehow or other find the energy, make a way to make it happen. So whatever your initial motivation was for starting out on leadership, whether at work, in Toastmasters or somewhere else, it may have been different to what my initial motivation was, but one thing that for sure we will have in common is that we all face challenges. Our organisation's mission is to empower individuals to become more effective communicators and leaders. And I believe the journey of leadership in Toastmasters has probably been one of the most character-building experiences I've ever had in my life. If you think back to the quote that I began with, that quote from Stephen Covey about how it's challenges that help us develop our character muscle, then those experiences we're having, those difficulties we're having, again, coming into it with a learning eye and seeing the opportunity to learn from that experience, to grow from that experience, to stand taller because of that experience. I would leave you with one thought in all of this: whatever the challenges are you're facing, just keep going and keep growing. Yassine, back to you.
Thank you so much, Madam DTM Morag, for the lovely session. Indeed, it was very enriching, and I personally learned a really lot from this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions or queries, you can raise your hand or type them in the question box, and we'll look forward to answering all of them, inshallah. Ma'am, are you ready? We have a first question. We have a hand raised by Toastmaster Abdul Fatah. I'll give you the mic. Yes, Toastmaster Abdul Fatah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much, DTM Morag, for this excellent presentation. The question which I have is, or rather than your thought on it, setting goals is always, as you said, we have to set ambitious goals. Now, do you consider sometimes, as we say, we have to take a step back in order to take 2 steps forward? And this situation arises sometimes when the quantity overcomes the quality. So sometimes you have to cut down on the quantity in order to really go for the quality, particularly also in situations which we're facing in our district, sometimes due economical problems. So sometimes you really have to say, all right, okay, I'm going to shrink a little bit if I have to, so I can preserve the quality. And so later on when things improve, and then I will obviously combine both quantity and quality. This is my question number 1. The second thing, I want to throw them all at the same time. The second thing I obviously appreciate about the fact, obviously, the teamwork and the communication and getting them involved. Although I've been only for 3 years in Toastmasters, but I've been for 40 years as a leader, CEO of a hospital and a director of a thing. And during these 40 years, I find out the best thing to engage is to make them feel they're owners. So I used to, every 3 months, take the team out. We go out to a hotel, we spend the whole day. And usually I don't put the vision there, but I discuss the issues with them and I let them come up with the answers, and I try to direct them toward what I have in mind, and that makes them feel, oh, they're the ones who came with the solutions, so they own it, and then they work harder for it, and they're more effective. This is an opinion, but obviously my first question was taking a step back in order to eventually take 2 steps forward, whether in economical conditions where things are difficult, or when the quantity becomes so much and then the quality gets lost. So what's your thought on that? Thank you very much, and I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you. So my thoughts, I will comment on your second point first, if I may. I absolutely agree with what you said. I think it's really important to remember that the team is the team and everyone has a valuable contribution to make. And if a team feels ownership, then they will do so much more. People go so much further when they feel like they own something. That doesn't give us a reason to manipulate, but it is one of the great paybacks of helping people to own something, whether it's a work situation as you describe, or whether it's a Toastmasters club. If members of a club feel like they own their club, which they should do because they do own their club, then they can actually achieve so much more together. To come to your first point about setting goals, I think there's a few things you have to bear in mind when you set goals. And one of those is you may be setting goals for 1 year, but hopefully you're not setting goals with a 1 year mindset. And what I mean by that is when, for example, if I take my home club, when my home club was created, we didn't set up the club thinking it's only going to exist for 1 year. We were setting up a club that we hoped would last a long time, and it's now 12 years old, and we're very happy with that, and it's going forward into the future. So you set your short-term goal in the context of the long-term situation, thinking also, how do we ensure the long-term health and survival of whatever the unit is that you're setting the goal for? That's one thing I would say about it. The other thing is you do have to take account of your circumstances. So you have to consider the factors that are around you. So realistically, what are the social, if you think of the old STEP analysis, social, technological, economic and political factors around you that are impacting your situation? We may have had, for example, if I take Europe as an example, so we were seeing growth in Europe only 4 years ago, we were seeing growth of 17%. At the moment, we are seeing growth that's very variable across the piece, but it's on average around 6%, 7%. So it's quite different because there have been many changes in the circumstance. And I think that's one of the things that when you do set goals, I think it's good to set goals that are achievable. It's also good to set stretch goals that you think, well, maybe, if things work in our favor, we could go for that and actually have that in mind. But I think you need the bigger picture when you set goals. So not just the here and now today, but rather the building for the future, but also taking account of the things around you. And that will often lead us into the decision of quality. If you think of your district's mission, a district's mission is to build new clubs and support all clubs in achieving excellence. And sometimes we forget about that second bit, and some districts sometimes focus a bit more on the first, on the building new clubs. But if we think about what does that look like to support all clubs to achieve excellence, and that's whether the club has been chartered for 1 month, whether it's 65 years old, whether it's a club with 8 members or a club with 55 members, we're looking at what does excellence look like in each of those. So quality is very much, I think, at the heart of what you have to do when you're goal setting. I think just going for numbers is not enough. You also have to build for the future and you have to build for quality.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that comprehensive answer. It was really helpful. Moving on with the next question we have to answer, DTM Morag. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Toastmaster Morgan. I'm happy to talk to you. This is Fahmi Abdul Qadir, Division Q. My question is regarding the stakeholders. How can we make them satisfied, especially when we are setting our goals? As you know, in Saudi Arabia, we have different stakeholders per district or per division. Can you elaborate on this subject, please? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning of your question.
My question is simple. We have to take care of our stakeholders. In Saudi Arabia, the stakeholders are variable. They are not one or two, according to the region. How can we take care of them when we are setting our goals? Thank you.
Okay, that's an interesting question. I am not quite sure what your practice is at the moment. It depends who your stakeholders are. Some stakeholders will be people who help you deliver those goals. Other stakeholders will be perhaps your district team who are looking for certain contributions from your division. And there may be other stakeholders in that picture depending on where you are. I understand that. But there are the organizational goals, the missions that you should be trying to achieve. I think when we build with stakeholders, I think one of the things that we need to do is build relationship with stakeholders, and have that communication. So there's always the option with goals to present a draft plan. Here's what we're thinking about, or to bring stakeholders together if you can and ask them, what do you think would be reasonable?
Let me be more focal. I'm talking about the external stakeholders, especially the government agencies who are supporting us. How can we meet their expectations?
The first thing you have to do is understand what their expectation is. I mean, I don't know what their expectations specifically are for you, but you have to understand what that is, and you have to understand where it fits in the context of what the organisation and what you think is reasonable. I don't know that I'm answering your question the way you want me to, and that may just be my lack of knowledge of the kind of conversations that either you've had in the past or what the government is expecting from you.
I look forward to talk to you later on in the chat side later on, so we can take care of that subject. And okay. I will give opportunity to other gentlemen or ladies to ask questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Fahmi, for the question. And moving on, we have Toastmaster Nazir. Toastmaster Nazir, your mic. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Your voice is a little bit not clear, Yassin, but thank you. I'd like to thank our international director, DTM Morag, for her insights and discussion on this conquering the challenges. I see now in District 79, and maybe as well 105, that we are having a new educational system, the pathways. From your experience, International Director, what do you think Region 11, the other districts, are they having any experience, difficulties in applying the new system? Please, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So Pathways was launched in Region 11 last week to all of the districts in Region 11, so we're all in the same place. With the launch in Region 11 came the launch of the materials in Arabic, German and Portuguese. And that's one of the reasons that our region was not delayed, but was in a later part of the rollout because they wanted the materials to be ready. I think what I'm seeing so far, and it has only been a week, so there's not so much to go on yet. What I am seeing is that where the guides have been out and visiting the clubs and building those connections with clubs, that seems to be going well. What I'm seeing are some guides are hosting online support sessions. So as people are trying to get to grips with Pathways, they are able to tap in and ask questions of the guides and, just help them through with the basic things. I personally, on the day we went live, took the assessment and signed up for my first path. I found it quite okay. I found it quite intuitive to use and read the materials that were available to me. And I've prepared, I will give my first Pathways project next week. And so I personally found it okay. I think it's too early to see any big feedback from the other districts in Region 11. What I am hearing from districts in Region 11, in other regions rather, is that they are enjoying the experience, but we do, because it's so different to what we've had, the Pathways guides are really important. So if any of you on this call this evening are Pathways guides, I would say to you, thank you for the work that you've done, but your district still needs you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you to Toastmasters Nazir and thank you so much, Madam Morag. Definitely, this change is something which is a leadership challenge, and but it's really very interesting. Even I personally witnessed some of the benefits of the new program for this, and it's really very interesting program. Moving on, I have like a question from my side as well. You mentioned about the reformation of your district, and often every year we have the realignments of the clubs, even if there is no reformation of the district. What was it that helped you through the reformation of your district? So, like, oftentimes people are hesitant to have the alignment. So, what would be your advice or your input in having the smooth realignment, or like in accepting the realignment of the districts?
I think the biggest single thing that I see that contributes to good alignments, or smooth alignments, as we might say, is consultation. So, for example, I don't know how you've done it in the past or how you're doing it this year, but normally what I see in my district is that we would have one representative per division on the alignment committee, and it's their job to liaise with and discuss with the clubs and the leaders in their divisions where changes are being made. And sometimes we don't have much change. I mean, we're a steadily growing district, but we sometimes don't have so much change. It's small changes. Occasionally we will have a really big change, creation of a new division or new areas and so on. And I find that that works best, because then the discussion is taking place locally with a leader from the division who's been appointed to serve representing their division, and the discussion has taken place then with the clubs locally. And once things are sorted out and agreed, then the alignment plan typically for us would not be contentious. When we have had difficulties and we've always got it through our district council, but sometimes with a lot of discussion, and where that has happened, it's where local consultation has not taken place. So my advice is consult and make sure that you have adequate representation and fair representation. One per division, I think, is a good measure, depending on the size of your divisions, of course.
Thank you so much, DTM. Indeed, it's always beneficial to have discussions with your team, with your immediate team, and it's always good that they have discussions with their team, their club responsibility, especially when we're talking about Toastmasters. That way, things are always good. Like I believe one of the important thing as a leader when coming across challenges or like overcoming challenges, I believe is that you have communication. What do you say on this? Is that true, or like the more open you have communications, the better it is?
I'm sorry, I didn't pick up your question. I'm having some trouble hearing you at the moment.
Sorry. It was just not a question, but a point that the best way to, or the effective way to overcome challenges as a leader is to always keep the communication channel open.
Yeah, yeah. You've got to keep those communication channels open.
Thank you, Gemma. We have our district director, DTM James. Please go ahead. If you have permission. DTM James. I see your hand raised. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Due to the time, we will be wrapping up this session in a few minutes. Madam Morag, do you have any closing remarks or comments that you would like to put forward?
I think I would just encourage you, as I said at the close of my presentation, to keep going and keep growing. You know, as leaders, I think sometimes as leaders we just have to stand firm, stand for what is right, and to make good decisions. And the biggest single thing I see again and again and again is to remember that you're not alone. You have to work with other people, but that means that you can give support and you can gain a lot of support from those relationships. So build the relationships, communicate well, and just keep going.
Thank you, DTM James. James, we cannot hear you still. TM James, can you unmute your mic and I believe we thank you so much, Madam Morag, for taking our time for us today, and it was really, really beneficial for you, for us, the whole session, and to learn from you and to understand how well we can conquer the leadership challenges and how we can overcome as a leader in our normal life as well as in Toastmasters. Because it is definitely great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you this evening.
I believe James would like to also thank you from his side on behalf of James. I would like to thank you for taking out this time and for yes, yeah, for I believe James is still having issues with the mic. So on behalf of DTM James, I would like to thank you for joining us tonight and for blessing Mr. Sandman with your presence. It was really an honor to have you with us and to learn from your expertise. Thank you so much, Anna. And to all the ladies and gentlemen who joined us today for this special webinar, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope that you have learned a lot from our district's initial level international partner. And we are very happy to have you all with us today. With this, We come to the conclusion of the webinar.
Hello?
Yes, James, finally.
Yes. Actually, I joined through the desktop, so now I just joined through mobile phone. Sorry for that inconvenience. I just would like to take this opportunity to thank our Madam International Director, DTM Morag, for sharing us her valuable input gained through her extensive experience as a district leader and now as international director. I don't know if you still have time, but probably maybe you'll just answer this through WhatsApp or through email. How you're dealing with difficult leaders? Have you ever dealt with someone who was giving you hard time? You may answer that through WhatsApp. So now, just accept our heartfelt thanks on behalf of the 679 for all your wonderful inputs. It really helped me a lot to understand some things that I didn't until now understand being a district officer. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. And I wish you every success for the remainder of the term.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, DTM James, for getting on and making it to the webinar. And when we meet again, we wish you all the best and happy Toastmasters.